joy to be able to share with you. We've just flown back from Johannesburg via London, via Philadelphia, got in late last night. We've been teaching an MA program out in South Africa. It's been fun. Bring you tons of greetings from Trinity Bible College and Graduate School. We're right in the middle of the Northern Plains. We got our stripes this year. We got caught in a blizzard. It took the state trooper about 2 hours to find us. But we survived, we're alive, we're glad to be alive, and lots of greetings from the students there. We've had a growing enrollment, and just lots of fun things are happening. So great to be here, great to be part of this family, and especially good to be able to speak to you today. If there's any time there's a sweet spot for me, it's with you guys. You guys are just beyond amazing. You have lived through dramatic technological change even in your lifetime. You've gone through probably one of the biggest cultural shifts that's ever occurred in a short period of time in human history, and you have survived. You survived and you are thriving, and I think the world of you. I think that the best is yet to come in terms of our nation, our calling and our gospel, and so it's just a real joy to be able to speak to you. I want to refer to the text that's a part of what you're doing and journeying together as a community. It's a text, as you might well know, if you've been tracking it, at the end of Matthew chapter 11. Jesus profoundly says, just come on, get a life, get things together, make some good decisions. And he goes on to say, take my burden upon you, for my yoke is easy, and take my yoke upon you, for my burden is easy, and my yoke is light. So that's found in Matthew 11, and it's right towards the end of that chapter. You've been tracking it, you know what it is. I've got another text that I want to show you, and you will see the connection in just a while. It's over in Ephesians chapter 5. If you like, what is described or what is proclaimed in the Gospels is now described and explained in the epistles. And Ephesians chapter 5 is one of those highly practical parts of the Bible. It simply tells you some good things to do. There are certain things that make life work, and there are certain things that don't make life work. And Ephesians 5 is one of those lists that is not a heavy burden. It's not a thing that you've got to struggle over. It's just good common sense. And it starts out by saying, be imitators of God. And then it goes on and talks about how you need to be moral in your thinking and your sexuality and don't allow impurity. And it even speaks about language and all that kind of stuff. Some really good stuff is found in Ephesians 5. And then it kind of reaches a crescendo. It finds its parallel with the Matthew 11 scripture in verse 15, where it says, be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise. Comma, same sentence, exactly the same breath almost, making the most of every opportunity because the days are evil. So I'm sure some of you are doing some good New Testament classes, and if you haven't, you probably know by now that anybody who responsibly tries to deal with the Bible, how does the Bible relate to our lives? If you do that responsibly, you do a few things very carefully. So, for example, you always check out who's writing, what's being written. That's just a good starting point. It's like getting an anonymous text and thinking, who's behind what's coming my way? Well, the same thing applies to the writings of the Bible. You check it out. Who's writing it? You find out why they're writing it. What was the context in which they're writing? Of course, you find out who they're writing to. And then if you get really technical, you probably go into some of the language that's behind it. What's the sentence structure? What's there that's for our learning? So some of you know how to do this. It's called basic Bible exposition. Well, that's a good way to approach Ephesians 5. And especially the verse that I read to you. What does it say? What's going on here? What are some of the important things that we should draw out of them? And I did that. I sort of cut it in every way that I could. And here is the best description of what I think the aged Apostle Paul would like to say to students in Northwest today. It's simply this: don't be stupid. I mean, is that in your face enough? I think it's exactly that. He's saying, don't be unwise. Make sure you make good decisions. Don't allow systemic stupidity to become a feature of your life. I think if to slip that over into what Jesus was saying a little earlier on, don't carry unnecessary burdens. Make sure that you line things up enough in your life. You make sufficient good decisions. You relate to the right kind of people. And at the end of it all, you're able to say, I have not committed myself to a lifestyle of stupidity. Don't be stupid. And then you notice there was just a comma there. It ran straight into the rest of the verse that actually gives you a real insight on how not to be stupid. And I'm going to sort of zoom over the first little bit of it, and then we're going to zero in on what's happening in the routine of your college right now. Here's the lesson that goes on. It says, make the most of every opportunity, for the days are evil. So that's where my imagination started to kick in. And I started to wonder what really it means to make the most of every opportunity. And it wasn't long before a whole bunch of things started to flood into my heart and my thinking. For example, I think it's probably reasonable to say that amongst those special opportunities, or the opportunities that we need to take, there are what we might call special times. Special times, just celebrating life. Just getting up with a realization that you've still got a pulse, you're still breathing air. It's actually good to be alive, and that the progress of life is a good thing. You know, I'm about the age now where people start complaining about birthdays. And I say, give me a break. It's a privilege to get older. I know a whole bunch of people that didn't have that privilege. Family that didn't get beyond their 20s. And I think, come on, just realize this every day is another day of opportunity. Celebrate special times, celebrate anniversaries, get with it. Thank God for another day of life. Get some energy and some enthusiasm and a sense of commitment. I'm alive, I'm in God's plan. He's been good to me. I've had another birthday, we've had another anniversary. I don't want to pop your bubble, but Christmas isn't in the Bible, but it's still worth celebrating. Good thing to do. About 18, 19 years ago now, our son was in a horrendous motor accident. He was crossing an intersection, and a 60,000-pound garbage truck going at 65 miles an hour plowed into his car, annihilated his car, pushed it about 120 yards down the road, took out trees like this, flipped up and came down on top of Jay's car and squashed his car to the height of a shoebox on its side. He suffered horrific injuries. Long story, I won't go into it all now. We were told every day we were told for 22 days that he wouldn't survive. This would be the day that he would die. And we went through that as a family. Carol, my daughter Anna, and myself, and the church that we were a part of. And anyway, the good news is he did survive, and it was an amazing outcome. And we were told to be ready to be in the rehab hospital for the next 6 to 8 months at least. And again, there was just a very clearly obvious God involvement. And we brought Jay home about 6 weeks later. But he was completely atrophied. His legs were about as thick as my wrists. And it was like bringing a new baby into the house. One of his injuries, his heart had been thrown from here into his abdominal cavity and back. It had ruptured his aorta. And as we're coming back, one of the ribs from his back here plunged right through the atrium, through the dividing hole between the left and right ventricles, penetrated the opposite side of his heart and pulled out. So you can understand why this was a pretty serious deal. And so he was still quite breathless from some of those injuries. But eventually the day came when I was given the opportunity to take my boy for a coffee. And I remember we went out, and we were looking forward to this coffee. And I said, come on, Jay. I helped him on my arm. I sat him down at the place. I went over to get a coffee. I brought it over. I put it down. Now, I don't know about you. I know I'm in the capital of coffee right now. But I drink my coffee. I mean, that's not a moral or value statement. You know, it's just a statement of fact. I don't know what else you do. I've never tried inhaling it, but I just drink it, you know. And so I say, come on, I put my cup down. I say, Jake, we got to go. And he looks at me. He says, chill, Dad, just chill. And I said, what's up? He says, Dad, I see his cup still full. He says, Dad, you don't drink coffee, you do coffee. So I think, okay, reverse mentoring going on. Let me try and learn here. And he says, it's just people, smell. It's just nice, Dad. You do coffee. So a little while later, we were able to go out again. He was a bit stronger. He says, you sit down, I'll get the coffee. So I sit down. He comes over with the coffee, puts it down in front of me, and I start sipping my coffee. And to my amazement, my coffee lasts nearly as long as his. So I said, Jason, this is just so cool. I'm doing coffee. And he looks at me, he says, yeah, Dad, but I ordered it extra hot. That's how I got to do coffee. But he was right. I've learned that when you face the extremities of life, you don't just sail through life hoping for the best, trying to catch a good wind. You thank God you're alive and you celebrate the progress of life. If there's any advice I'd give, I'd say do that with all of your hearts, enthusiastically. That's why you need to get through, finish where you start, graduate from the school that you're at, and thank God for the progress of life. So there are special times. Another thing that I'd like to mention really quickly are what I'd call social times. I'm just so glad to see you connecting. I'm just a bit horrified at all the donuts and coffee and stuff that's thrown in there with these events that you have. I thought you'd be much more cool in the Northwest than we are in the Midwest. But hey, get together. Connect with each other. You are wired to connect socially and be involved with one another and make friends and grow your circles and refuse to be isolationist and in some kind of outer orbit around the rest of the people that you know. I remember when I became a Christ follower, met a friend who I hadn't seen for a while. He was really zealous. He said, would you like to come to church? I said, that'd be great. We went to church. I'd never been in a church like that before. And in this church, they would sing vibrantly. And then we got to the end, and the preacher said something like, close your eyes, bow your head. I'd never seen that before. And then he said, if you'd like to give your life to Jesus, just one thing. Will you put up your hand? And I'll acknowledge that. Some of you have been in churches like that. I didn't know what was going on, but my very zealous friend knew exactly what was going on, so he reached over, grabbed my wrist, stuck my hand right up in the air. The preacher was onto it like, he said, I see that hand. I'm thinking, I don't know what I've done, but I'm glad he saw my hand. And then he did something which wasn't completely as honest as it should be. He said, just one more thing. If you have put up your hand under the courage of your convictions, come on down. My friend picked me up by the collar, and he sort of walked me down the aisle. I brought him to church. I got him to church. He's given his life to Jesus. I had no idea what I was doing. And then one more thing, go into a little room. So I'm thinking, I'm going to die in there. Nobody even know that it's happened. I'm thinking, what's going on here? So I go into this little room, and they read me John 3:16 and pat me on the back and say a little prayer and say, you're a Christian now. Congratulations. I said, thank you very much. And I walk out. Everybody's really excited for me. And I didn't quite know exactly what had happened. It wasn't particularly the most inspiring moment of my life. I was just doing what they asked me to do. And then a friend said, hey, by the way, we have youth on Saturday or on Friday. Would you like to come? I said, that sounds fine. Didn't have a very active social life. I'm just going on 14. And so I get ready. You know how to, well, some of you beyond that now, but there's always something grows on your chin on the day that it really shouldn't be growing on your chin. And I sort of went through the day and then finally just lost a little bit of courage. So I turned around, I went back in. My parents said, aren't you going off to the youth service? I said, no, I'm not going today. And about 7:30 that night, my friend Winton knocks on the door. He says, I was looking out for your church and you weren't there. I said, yeah. He says, it's not too late. You can come now. That'd be great. So I said, all right, let's go. So I'm dating myself now. Not even your president would understand what I'm saying now. And that's really quite something because he's also quite old. But so I get in. This guy had a little mini minor Cooper S. You still get mini Cooper S's now, but they're made by BMW. I mean, they don't have oil leaks or anything. This one had real good British engineering and real oil leaks. And so I get in this car, and in those days, we put big wide tires on the back. You had an exhaust pipe coming out. It's just a tiny little engine, great big exhaust pipe like this. And the coolest of everything is you had fur on the dashboard. I mean, that was what really made... You think it's gross, but that's... And so I remember I get in this car, and he says, here we go. He sticks it in first gear. I'm telling you what, he didn't see stop streets. He didn't see corners. We didn't slow down for anything. I found all kinds of religious stuff that I never even knew that I knew. I said the Lord's Prayer. I threw a couple of Hail Marys in. I got everything out of me. I'm holding underneath that seat. I get out. He says, let's go in. I said, yeah, it'd be nice to go inside. He drove the thing like a madman. I got into the youth service and I got connected. I met real people. Not perfect, but good. And you know what? A little while later, this beautiful, blonde, green-eyed 16-year-old comes into the room. Oh man, I lost it. She was just unbelievably beautiful. And 43 years later, she's still my bride. And all happened. How did it happen? It happened because I understood that there's a massive dynamic to our Christian faith called fellowship. Doing life together. Getting connected. I think I'm speaking to some who have just got into a bit of an outer orbit. And I want to say in the language of the scripture, don't be stupid. Don't be dumb. Get involved, get committed, find church, and thank God for life. There are other things I want to say, but in terms of these special occasions, let me say one more, and I'm going to set you a little task as a group today. And it's this, that amongst the special times and the social times, you've got to understand that there are sacred moments. As equally as we made to connect with one another, there is a massive homing system built into your soul that seeks God. Wants meaning, wants something that's so transcendental, so much above your life and experience, so real that it could only be God. Those moments of God encounter that transform you. About 3 weeks after giving my life to Jesus in that rather unordinary church service, we used to have to do 2 languages at school, English and a Dutch derivative called Afrikaans. And I suddenly realized that for the first time in a semester, I'd sat through the whole class because as a nasty pre-Christ following teenager, my greatest ideal in life was how quickly can I reduce my teacher to tears and get kicked out of the class. I mean, some people go hunting, others play sports. I just went after my teacher. And I suddenly sat through a whole class, and I looked into it, and I said, something's changed. My values have changed. My outlook's changed. The way I deal with people, the respect I give others. And I realized it was because God had done something very real inside of me. And one of the things I know you're being encouraged in as a school and as a group of students is to learn how to have those moments, how to encounter God. And just as part of stimulating you to think about this further, I thought that there are perhaps 3 levels of real God encounter that I should encourage you to discover. The first one is this: on your own. Just amazing how difficult it is for any of us to be on our own. No screen time, nothing else to distract, just learning what it is to have our souls enriched by exploring the presence of God. I want to encourage you. I want to exhort you. I want to say, please, 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 if you don't grow in any other area, learn what it is to have good, wholesome introspection. Not self-serving navel-gazing, but a real sense of, I'm in God's presence. And how can I celebrate my being? You see, God made you a human being, not a human doing. Make sure you engage that introspective time. Of course, we have God encounters in groups. That's what we call interaction. Just learning what it is, as I have heard already, takes place where you actually pray. Why don't you just learn what it is to have those disruptive moments where with somebody else you just stop what's going on and say, why don't we pray, and get rid of religious language and express yourself to the Almighty and let God be God and show you some great things. I could unpackage some amazing stories, but time's not allowing. And then, of course, there's this whole thing called intercession, which is what we do as a community. We do so on behalf of the community and in the community. So here are 3 things that I'm going to let you finish this chapel out on. 3 questions. Maybe you know how to do this. I don't know how you do it. You know exactly how to do it. But in whatever groups you get together, 2, 3, 4, 7, whatever it is, 3 little things. I ask you earnestly, have you developed a habit of just being on your own with God? Check that out. Give yourself the test. Be honest with others. Find a way to do it. Here's a big deal. Are you really sensitive to the needs of those around about you? Have you so got the blinkers on and the end goal in mind that you've lost tenderness, gentleness? How about just good manners? And the sensitivity to others so that you're able to actually be part of the solution, not part of the problem. And the final little thing you do in your groups is, how can you speak to God on behalf of your immediate community and your wider community? Are you just always shouting at God to get things right? Or have you had meaningful conversations with God that go a whole lot deeper than just trying to find superficial solutions to the issues that are making you uncomfortable? And are you pleading with God, touching God, and asking God to, with grace and love and all that Jesus does best, invade the community that you're a part of? So thanks for having us. Love the place you're in. Enjoy the privilege of your journey at Northwest, because you're in a remarkable context and environment. And in whatever small groups you get together, why don't you process these 3 things that I put up for you? And God bless you.